into the shape of your wrist. There. Good afternoon, everyone. And for those of you who may not know me, my name's Jana, and I'm a Soto Zen Buddhist priest, and I'm very, very fond of Hertford Street. I'm very fond of the Gay Men's Buddhist Sangha and their friends. And I'd like to dedicate this talk to Isan Dorsey, who was the founder of this temple, and also to John King, a dear friend of mine, and a dear friend of quite a few people here, I believe. Isan is a particularly, what can I say, a particular hero of mine. Last weekend I got to pretend to be Isan, which was wonderful. Every year Maitri, the hospice that he helped to found, every year they have a big fundraiser called Bliss. And John King used to talk about Isan and then lead a little ceremony, and for the last 9 years or so I've gone and talked about Isan and led a little ceremony. So they were looking for someone to put on their poster for next year. So they emailed me and asked for a tall, bald-headed monk that looked like Isan from the back. And I actually once took a photograph of myself and photoshopped what I would have if I could, which is a nice full beard and a moustache on it. And I showed it to my teacher and said, "Who's this?" And she said, "Oh, now wait, it looks familiar, hang on, oh, I know, it's Isan." So, anyway, and someone just called me Blanche, so anywho, they picked me because I look like Isan from the back. So you'll see posters all over town in a few months of myself and David, who's a Tibetan monk, who you may have seen around town. He's quite well known. He wears his robes all the time. So he and I posed on a hundreds of foot drop-off to stand there and look calm and compassionate. And we were absolutely terrified. We started off holding hands. And I was saying, "You okay? No, I'm terrified. You all right now?" And then eventually they said, "Could you move apart a little? You just look like one big silhouette, you know." Okay. So, that's a good teaching on appearances are not always what they seem to be, because you'll see this big poster, and there they are, a Tibetan monk and a Soto Zen monk, calmly standing and pointing towards the horizon on the top of Mount Tamalpais, and it's not what it appears to be. So. Isan was one of my favourite people because he didn't ever pretend. He didn't ever pretend that he had anything other than a very wild life. He didn't pretend that he was so holy that, you know, butter wouldn't melt in his mouth. And that honesty and that authenticity is what I like to look for in my own practice. Have I peeled away the layers, or am I still putting things on to cover up the real person? Albert asked me a while ago for what my title was for my talk today, and I think both of us didn't remember what it was supposed to be.
I couldn't remember, and I couldn't remember if he had even given me a topic, and I thought, well, we'll think of something.
And I seem to recall that I picked absolute freedom. I think that might have been what it was. The interesting thing about trying to talk about Zen Buddhist practice is that it's really impossible. What came up to my mind when I put the idea of absolute freedom was joy. What's the first arising on the path of practice? Joy. But it's not always that obvious. you might have noticed sometimes people who are studying Zen, they tend to be really kind of severe looking, you know, and when we start to meditate, I know a lot of very painful stuff can come up. And the idea of uncovering ourselves, of taking off all the extra stuff to see what's really here and really authentic, sometimes the first thing you uncover is not exactly joyful. I remember when I first came to practice, this kind of practice, it was because I'd just been in an abusive relationship and I was suffering from incredible post-traumatic stress disorder, very depressed. So the first things I started to uncover were not joy. I had not been going around suppressing my joy. I'd been going around suppressing my misery. So for the first while, it wasn't exactly joy that came rushing up. I brought a few friends with me, as usual. Here they are. The funny thing actually, when thinking about a talk is, you may have noticed, because some of you have seen me talk here before, that I don't have any talk written. And the reason for that is because I feel I have to put my mouth where my mouth is, so to speak. If I'm talking about the authentic self, the authentic person, then that authentic self, that authentic person, is without artifice, is without specific preparation. Doesn't have to read something off a piece of paper to make sure that what comes out of their mouth is true, or resonates as truth, or resonates even as just authentic. So I don't actually write talks at all. What I do is, when I have an idea of a topic, or something arises that I think, that might be something to talk about, I take some books, whatever comes to mind, whatever comes to hand, and it's kind of like tilling the field. This morning I sat down, I looked through all these different things, and pieces seem to jump out at me. Things seem to go, okay, use me, talk about me. If you've got a minute, I'd like a mention. So what you're seeing here is not someone trying to get the talk right and trying to impress people and trying to give you the right teaching or trying to appear like anything. It's actually kind of exciting to me. It's kind of a mystery. Where do the words come from? If you haven't got it all figured out beforehand, just like life, where do the words come from? Is that the same place as the source of joy? Good question. Of course, as I said at the beginning, you can't really talk about this because in Zen we try to avoid dualism, and our language is inherently dualistic. You can't say good and bad together. Good, bad. It's good there and bad there. It's hot there and it's cold there. So to speak non-dualistically is actually quite a challenge. So when I was skipping through a number of different books this morning, I suddenly, of course, picked up Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and there's Suzuki Roshi on why you can't speak. So I thought that might be a nice opening. It reminded me of those disclaimers you get on products. You know, try this, it might make you look better, but it might not, and we're not responsible. So here's what Suzuki Roshi had to say. This is Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, from the chapter on right attitude. The more you understand our thinking, the more you find it's difficult to talk about. The purpose of talking is to give you some idea of our way, but actually it's not something to talk about, something to practice rather. The best way is just to practice without saying anything. So it was kind of funny when I came in and the Zazen had just started, and then someone else came in and sat back here, and we're all sitting here, and I thought, what if that person thinks this is the lecture? That would be just right.